The alarm shrieked at 6:30 a.m., but Marcus had been awake for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling of his cramped Chicago apartment. 7 hours of sleep should have been enough. The fitness app said so. The sleep tracker on his wrist confirmed it. Yet his body felt like it had been running a marathon in his dreams. He dragged himself to the bathroom mirror and winced. The face, looking back, belonged to someone older than his 35 years. Puffy eyes, skin that had lost its glow, a jawline softened by the stubborn weight that no amount of gym torture seemed to touch. 3 different diet plans this year, 2 personal trainers, 1 expensive sleep study that concluded everything was within normal range. The kitchen counter displayed the aftermath of last night's defeat. An empty energy drink can beside his laptop, still glowing with unfinished work emails. The scale in the corner seemed to mock him, the same number it had shown for months, despite his religious adherence to calorie counting and morning runs that left him more exhausted than energized. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his trainer. "Ready to crush it today? Remember, summer body starts with winter discipline." He almost laughed. Winter discipline. He'd been disciplining himself into the ground for years. At the office, Marcus noticed Kenji again, the quiet Japanese consultant who joined their marketing team 6 months ago. While everyone else clutched their 3rd coffee by 10 a.m., Kenji sipped tea from a small clay cup, the same one every day. There was something unsettling about his calmness, the way he seemed to float through 12-hour workdays without the jittery energy that Marcus had come to accept as normal. During lunch, Marcus watched Kenji eat from what looked like a child's portion, a small ceramic rice bowl, neat vegetables, a piece of fish. No phone scrolling, no hurried gulping. Just quiet attention to each bite. The bowl itself was beautiful in its simplicity, glazed in soft blue, with hairline cracks that spoke of age and use. "That's it?" Marcus found himself asking. "You'll be hungry in an hour." Kenji looked up, surprised by the attention. "Actually, I feel satisfied for hours. This bowl belonged to my grandmother. She always said it holds exactly what the body needs." Marcus studied the bowl. It couldn't hold more than a cup of rice. His own lunch tray overflowed with a burger, fries, and a diet soda, yet his stomach was already planning its 3 p.m. snack attack. That evening, Marcus stood in his kitchen, takeout containers covering every surface. Thai food tonight, because he'd earned it after another brutal workout that left his knees aching and his appetite ravenous. He ate standing up, scrolling through social media, the TV providing background noise to drown out the silence of his apartment. His reflection caught in the dark window above the sink. When had eating become this frantic thing, this unconscious shoveling of food while his mind raced elsewhere? He thought of Kenji's grandmother's bowl, the deliberate way each grain of rice was savored. Later, lying in bed at midnight, Marcus's laptop warmed his chest as he spiraled down a rabbit hole about Japanese longevity. Okinawans who lived to 100, Tokyo salarymen who stayed lean despite eating rice daily, the concept of hara hachi bu, eating until 80% full. The screen's blue light made his eyes water, but he couldn't stop reading. These people weren't counting calories obsessively or destroying their joints in gyms. They were following rhythms he'd never learned, rhythms that seemed to work with their bodies instead of against them. His phone buzzed, another notification from his meal tracking app, reminding him to log his dinner. Marcus stared at the screen. Then, for the first time in 2 years, he closed the app without entering anything. In the darkness, he wondered what it would feel like to eat from a bowl that knew when enough was enough. If you've ever felt tired, even after a full night of sleep, or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar, and stay with us for the next chapters. The next morning, Marcus found himself lingering in the office kitchen while Kenji prepared his tea. The ritual was mesmerizing. Water heated to a specific temperature, leaves steeped for exactly 3 minutes, the first sip taken with eyes closed, as if he were listening to something Marcus couldn't hear. "Your grandmother taught you that too?" Marcus asked. "Not just the tea," Kenji smiled. "The listening. She said the body speaks quietly, but if you're always rushing, you miss the conversation." That weekend, Marcus found himself in a small Japanese goods store in downtown Chicago, feeling slightly ridiculous. The elderly owner, Mrs. Tanaka, watched him pick up and put down various bowls with the patience of someone who had seen this uncertainty before. "You looking for something specific?" she asked in lightly accented English. Maybe a rice bowl, for portion control." She studied his face with the directness that only comes with age. "Ah, you want to eat less?" "I want to eat." "Right," Marcus said, surprising himself with the honesty. Mrs. Tanaka disappeared into the back room and returned with a simple ceramic bowl, white with a subtle blue glaze. "This one, made by my cousin in Kyoto. Not fancy, but honest work." The bowl fit perfectly in Marcus's hands, substantial yet delicate. "How do I know how much rice to put in?" "Fill it once. Your grandmother's hands knew the right amount. Your hands will learn." That night, Marcus cooked rice for the first time since college. 1 cup of brown rice, steamed vegetables, a small piece of salmon. He filled the bowl once and set it on his cleared dining table. No laptop, no TV, no phone. The silence felt enormous. The first bite was a revelation, not because it tasted different, but because he tasted it at all. Without distraction, he noticed the nutty sweetness of the rice, the way it paired with the vegetables. Halfway through the bowl, something strange happened, a subtle shift in his hunger, like a door quietly closing. He sat back, startled. This was what Kenji meant by listening. The following week brought the usual challenges. Brad, his gym buddy, raised an eyebrow at Marcus's newly modest lunch portions. "Dude, you'll waste away to nothing. Summer cut season doesn't start until March." "I'm not cutting," Marcus replied. "I'm just eating differently." "You going all zen on me now?" Brad laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Next, you'll be meditating and burning incense." Marcus noticed how Brad's own lunch, a massive protein bowl with double meat, seemed to stress him out rather than satisfy him. The constant mental math of macros and calories, the anxiety about wasting a workout if he didn't hit his numbers. At home, Marcus began eating all his meals from the ceramic bowl, not just rice, but everything. Salads, soups, even the occasional pasta. The bowl became a boundary, a gentle teacher. Some meals left him wanting more, but he learned to sit with that feeling instead of immediately reaching for seconds. 3 weeks in, he noticed his jeans fitting differently. Not dramatically. The scale showed only a few pounds lost, but something fundamental had shifted in how his body felt after eating. The post-meal crashes that used to send him reaching for caffeine had disappeared. His sister called one evening while he was washing his dinner dishes, just one bowl, one pair of chopsticks he'd also bought from Mrs. Tanaka. "You sound different," she observed. "Calmer." Marcus looked at the bowl drying on his counter, its simple beauty somehow anchoring him to this new rhythm. "I think I'm learning to listen to something I've been ignoring for years." "Your body?" "My body. My actual hunger. The difference between wanting more and needing more." Later that night, Marcus realized he hadn't opened his calorie tracking app in over a week. The compulsive need to log, measure, and control every bite had quietly faded, replaced by something that felt more like conversation than surveillance. He picked up the bowl, running his fingers along its smooth rim. His grandmother had been gone for 10 years, but he suddenly remembered her hands, how she'd served Sunday dinners with such attention, such care. She'd never owned a food scale or downloaded an app, yet no one left her table feeling anything but perfectly satisfied. The changes crept in like dawn, so gradual Marcus almost missed them. 6 weeks into eating from his grandmother's bowl, he woke up one Saturday morning without an alarm. Not the jarring, anxious wakefulness of his insomniac nights, but a gentle surfacing, like his body had finished some important internal work. His energy felt different too, steadier. Less like the caffeine-powered highs and crashes that had become his normal rhythm, more like a calm river that just kept flowing. At his quarterly checkup, Dr. Martinez reviewed his lab results with raised eyebrows. Your triglycerides are down 20%. Blood pressure is better. What have you been doing? Eating from a smaller bowl, Marcus said, then immediately felt foolish. Dr. Martinez's pen paused over his chart. That's it? And listening to when I'm actually full. Not eating while distracted. Mindful eating. The doctor nodded slowly. I've been telling patients about that for years. Most people think it's too simple to work. Marcus thought about explaining the deeper shift. How the bowl had become a meditation, how meals now felt like conversations with his body instead of battles against it. But Dr. Martinez was already moving on to the next item on his checklist. The real test came during his monthly dinner with college friends. They'd chosen their usual spot, a sprawling chain restaurant with portions large enough to feed small villages. Marcus studied the menu with new eyes, seeing not just foods, but delivery systems for unconscious overeating. You're being weird about the menu, his friend Sarah observed. Just get the nachos, we're splitting everything anyway. When the food arrived, Marcus found himself in familiar territory, peer pressure disguised as generosity. The table groaned under weight of excess, loaded nachos, buffalo wings, fried appetizers that seemed designed to overwhelm rather than nourish. Come on, live a little, Brad encouraged, sliding the nacho plate closer. You've been eating like a monk lately. Marcus took a small portion and ate slowly, paying attention to each bite. His friends continued their usual pattern, eating rapidly while talking, reaching for more before finishing what was on their plates. The restaurant's lighting was harsh, the music just loud enough to prevent real conversation, the entire environment engineered to encourage thoughtless consumption. Halfway through the meal, Marcus felt the familiar signal, satisfied, complete. He set down his fork and leaned back. Done already? Sarah looked at his barely touched plate with confusion. Are you feeling okay? I feel great, actually, just full. Full? Off that tiny amount? Brad shook his head. Dude, you're going to hurt your metabolism eating so little. Marcus almost smiled. Brad's plate was piled high with his third helping, yet he'd been complaining all evening about his energy crashes and stubborn belly fat. The irony was lost on everyone except Marcus. Driving home later, Marcus thought about the evening's dynamics. His friends weren't just eating food, they were eating distraction, eating social belonging, eating the promise that more would somehow equal better. He'd been doing the same thing for years. The next morning brought a text from his trainer. Haven't seen you in weeks, getting back to crushing those goals? Marcus stared at the message, remembering the relentless cycle of punishment and reward that had defined his relationship with fitness. The brutal workouts, followed by binge eating, the constant battle between discipline and rebellion. He thought of Kenji, who'd mentioned walking to work every day, not for exercise, but for transition time between home and office. A gentle rhythm instead of dramatic extremes. Would you rather force yourself with willpower, or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you, and share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. Marcus found himself walking more too, to the grocery store, around the neighborhood after dinner, not as punishment for eating, not as frantic calorie burning, but as a way of moving through the world that felt sustainable. His apartment began to change as well. The kitchen counter, once cluttered with supplement bottles and protein powders, now held just essentials. He'd moved his laptop charging station out of the bedroom, creating a boundary between work and rest that his nervous system had been craving for years. The ceramic bowl sat in its place of honor on the counter, a daily reminder that sometimes the most profound changes come disguised as the smallest adjustments. 3 months in, the test arrived in the form of a work crisis. A major client threatened to pull their contract, demanding a complete strategy overhaul in 10 days. The old Marcus would have responded with his usual arsenal, energy drinks, take-out binges, and marathon work sessions that stretched deep into the night. Instead, Marcus found himself facing a choice that felt bigger than just meal planning. The office transformed into a battlefield of stress eating and caffeine dependency. His colleagues survived on vending machine runs and delivered pizza, their conversations punctuated by complaints about exhaustion and weight gain. Brad had gained 15 pounds since Marcus started his bowl experiment, though he insisted it was winter bulk season. "You're not seriously going to eat that tiny lunch during crunch time?" Sarah asked, eyeing Marcus's modest bento box with disbelief. "We're working 14-hour days." Marcus unwrapped his carefully portioned meal, rice in his ceramic bowl, which he'd started bringing to work, alongside vegetables and protein. The familiar ritual grounded him even in the fluorescent chaos of the office. "I need my brain to work more than I need to feel stuffed," he replied. What surprised him was how true that statement felt. While his colleagues rode the roller coaster of sugar highs and caffeine crashes, Marcus maintained steady energy throughout the long days. The bowl taught him to fuel consistently rather than frantically, like tending a fire instead of dousing it with gasoline. Kenji noticed the change during one of their brief kitchen encounters. "You've learned to eat like you want to feel good, instead of eating like you want to escape feeling bad." The observation hit deeper than Marcus expected. How many meals had been about escape rather than nourishment? How many times had he used food to buffer against stress, boredom, or the simple discomfort of being present in his own life? The crisis peaked on day 7. The entire team worked until 2 a.m., fueled by pure desperation and whatever food delivery apps could provide. Marcus watched his colleagues crash and burn. Brad fell asleep at his desk. Sarah snapped at everyone over minor details, and the creative director had what looked suspiciously like an anxiety attack. Marcus, despite eating less than anyone else, felt steady. Tired, yes, but not the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from fighting your own biology. "How are you not dying right now?" Sarah asked during a 10 p.m. break. "You're eating like a bird, but you're the only one still thinking clearly." Marcus looked at his ceramic bowl, now empty but somehow still anchoring him to something stable in the chaos. "I think I've been confusing quantity with quality for most of my adult life." The project was saved, the client stayed, and the team celebrated with their traditional success ritual, a massive dinner at the most indulgent restaurant in the city. Marcus joined them, curious to see how his transformed relationship with food would handle the social pressure. The menu was a monument to excess, everything fried, loaded, supersized. His colleagues ordered with the enthusiasm of prisoners finally freed, their stress transmuting into anticipatory gluttony. Marcus ordered simply grilled fish, steamed vegetables, a small portion of rice. When the food arrived, he ate slowly, while conversations swirled around him. His colleagues consumed with the same frantic energy they'd brought to the crisis, as if the food could somehow compensate for the week of stress their bodies had endured. "You're really not going to celebrate?" Brad asked, gesturing at the table, groaning under excessive portions. "I am celebrating," Marcus replied. "I'm celebrating feeling good in my body, instead of feeling like I need to escape it." Later, driving home while his colleagues nursed food comas and complained about feeling gross, Marcus reflected on how completely his relationship with stress and food had transformed. The ceramic bowl had been the beginning, but something larger had shifted, his entire understanding of what it meant to care for himself. He thought of his grandmother again, how she'd moved through her kitchen with such calm intention. She'd lived through the Depression, rationing, real scarcity, yet she'd taught him that abundance wasn't about quantity. It was about attention, gratitude, and the wisdom to know when enough was enough. 6 months after buying his ceramic bowl, Marcus stood in his kitchen on a quiet Sunday morning, preparing breakfast with movements that had become meditation. The rice steamed gently while he arranged vegetables with the same care Kenji brought to his daily tea ritual. The bowl sat ready, its blue glaze catching the morning light. As he filled it with exactly the right amount, his hands now knew without measuring, a profound realization settled over him like a gentle weight. This wasn't about portion control. It had never been about portion control. The bowl was teaching him something his culture had systematically forgotten: the difference between satisfaction and fullness, between nourishment and numbing, between eating to live well and eating to cope with living poorly. Marcus thought about the previous 6 months, not just the 20 pounds that had effortlessly melted away, but the complete restructuring of his relationship with his own body. The desperate cycle of restriction and binge eating had simply stopped. Not through willpower or punishment, but through something that felt more like remembering than learning. His phone rang. Dr. Martinez, calling with his latest lab results. "I have to ask again what you're doing," the doctor said without preamble. "Your numbers are better than they've been in 5 years. Blood pressure, cholesterol, inflammatory markers, everything's moving in the right direction." "I eat all my meals from one small bowl," Marcus said, "and I don't eat while distracted anymore." A long pause. "That's still all you're doing?" "And I go to bed earlier, walk more, drink tea instead of coffee sometimes, nothing dramatic." Another pause. "Marcus, I've been practicing for 20 years. I've seen patients try every diet, supplement and exercise program imaginable. Most of them fail because they're fighting against their biology instead of working with it. What you're describing, it sounds like you figured out how to work with your body instead of against it." After hanging up, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his perfectly portioned breakfast, marveling at the simplicity of what had saved him. Not a diet plan or a workout regimen, but a single ceramic bowl that had taught him how to listen. The real transformation, he realized, wasn't in his waistline, it was in his nervous system. For years, he'd been in a constant state of biological stress, fighting his natural hunger cues, overriding his body's signals, treating meals like problems to solve rather than opportunities for nourishment. The bowl had given him permission to trust his body's wisdom again. That afternoon, he visited Mrs. Tanaka's shop to buy a gift for his sister, a ceramic teacup this time. The elderly woman remembered him immediately. "The bowl is working well?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Better than I could have imagined, but I think I'm finally understanding what you meant about honest work." "Ah? The bowl doesn't make me eat less. It makes me eat consciously. There's a difference I never understood before." Mrs. Tanaka nodded slowly. "My grandmother used to say that Americans think with their minds about what their bodies need, instead of feeling with their bodies what their spirits need. The bowl just helps you feel again." Walking home, Marcus reflected on the social resistance he'd encountered during his transformation. Friends and family had been puzzled by his new relationship with food, sometimes even threatened by it. His calm refusal to participate in stress eating or social overeating had held up an uncomfortable mirror to their own unconscious patterns. But the results spoke louder than skepticism. His energy was stable throughout the day. His mood was more even. His sleep had deepened. His clothes fit better, yes, but more importantly, he felt at home in his body for the first time since childhood. The ceramic bowl sat on his counter, simple and unassuming. To anyone else, it was just a piece of pottery. To Marcus, it was the tool that had taught him the difference between living in his body and being at war with it. He thought of all the money he'd spent over the years, gym memberships, supplements, meal plans, fitness trackers, searching for the secret to feeling good in his own skin. The answer had been simpler and more profound than anything he'd imagined. Learning to eat like he wanted to feel good, rather than eating to cope with feeling bad. That evening, as he prepared dinner with the same mindful attention that had become second nature, Marcus understood that he hadn't just changed his diet. He'd changed his entire relationship with self-care, moving from punishment and control to attention and respect. The bowl had been the beginning, but the real transformation was in his nervous system's return to a state his ancestors had taken for granted, trusting the body's wisdom instead of fighting against it. 2 years later, Marcus stood in his kitchen preparing lunch for his nephew, who was visiting for the weekend. 8-year-old David watched with fascination as Marcus filled 2 ceramic bowls, the original blue one and a smaller companion piece he'd bought after his transformation, became undeniable. "Why is your bowl so small, Uncle Marcus?" David asked. "Aren't you still hungry after?" "Try it and see," Marcus smiled, handing David the smaller bowl filled with rice, vegetables and chicken. "Eat slowly, and tell me when you feel satisfied, not when you feel full." They sat at the kitchen table, no phones or television, just the quiet sounds of mindful eating. Marcus watched David's face change as he discovered what so many adults had forgotten: the difference between physical satisfaction and the compulsive need to keep consuming. "I feel done," David said with surprise, looking at his half-finished bowl. "But I want to keep eating because it tastes good." "That's the difference between your tongue and your stomach," Marcus explained. "Your tongue always wants more. Your stomach knows when you have enough." Later, Marcus's sister found them in the living room, David quietly reading while Marcus prepared tea with the same deliberate attention he'd learned from watching Kenji years ago. "I don't know what you did to him," she said, "but he's never sat still for this long without a screen. We just ate mindfully, no distractions." She studied Marcus's face, noting the calmness that had replaced the chronic stress lines she remembered. "You really did change everything with the bowl, didn't you?" Marcus considered the question while pouring tea into simple ceramic cups. The bowl had been the catalyst, but the real transformation had been systemic. His sleep schedule, his relationship with work stress, his understanding of what his body needed versus what his mind wanted. "The bowl taught me that most of my problems weren't willpower problems," he said. "They were environment and attention problems. I was trying to force myself to eat less while surrounded by everything designed to make me eat more and faster." His sister nodded slowly. She'd watched him cycle through diets and fitness obsessions for years, the constant struggle between restriction and rebellion that defined so many modern relationships with food. David's pediatrician says childhood obesity is at an all-time high. Kids don't know how to recognize their own hunger signals anymore. Marcus looked at his nephew, absorbed in his book with the contentment that comes after a satisfying meal. "Maybe because we never teach them. We teach them to clean their plates, to eat quickly, to use food for entertainment rather than nourishment." That evening, after his sister and David left, Marcus reflected on how completely his life had reorganized around the simple principle he'd learned from a ceramic bowl. His work performance had improved as his energy stabilized. His relationships had deepened as he became less reactive and more present. His bank account had even benefited. The money once spent on supplements, diet programs, and stress eating now went toward higher quality whole foods. The most profound change, though, was internal. The constant background anxiety about his weight, his health, his appearance had simply faded, replaced by a quiet confidence in his body's wisdom. His phone buzzed with a text from Kenji, now working in Tokyo, but still in touch. "How's the mindful eating practice?" Marcus photographed his dinner, a simple meal in the familiar blue bowl, and sent it back with a message: "Still learning. Thank your grandmother for me." Later, as Marcus washed his dishes in the quiet kitchen, he thought about the invisible chains that modern life wrapped around something as basic as eating. The diet industry, the fitness obsessions, the constant messaging that bodies couldn't be trusted, that hunger was the enemy, that more was always better than enough. The ceramic bowl sat drying on his counter, its cracked glaze testament to 2 years of daily use. Such a simple thing to carry such transformative power. But perhaps that was the point. Real change didn't come from complicated systems or dramatic interventions. It came from returning to wisdom so basic that cultures had taken it for granted for thousands of years. Marcus turned off the lights and headed to bed, his body satisfied, his nervous system calm, his relationship with himself fundamentally healed. Tomorrow would bring another opportunity to practice what the bowl had taught him, that eating consciously was an act of self-respect and that the body's wisdom was worth trusting. In the darkness of his bedroom, Marcus smiled, thinking of David's surprised discovery that satisfaction and fullness weren't the same thing. Maybe the next generation could learn that lesson without first spending decades fighting against their own biology. The ceramic bowl would be waiting in the morning, ready to teach its gentle lesson once again, that enough was always enough, and that paying attention was the most radical act in a world designed for distraction. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.